still remember the exact moment she said those words. The room was dim, the curtains barely moving, and the air felt heavier than it should have. I was sitting on the edge of the bed, hands trembling without a clear reason, when she reached over to the lamp beside her and quietly switched it off. The soft click echoed louder than it should have in the small, quiet space. Then, in a calm, almost whispering voice, she said, "We're not alone." Not fearful, not dramatic, just certain. It wasn't what she said that unsettled me. It was how she said it, like someone gently stating the weather or commenting on the time or acknowledging something they had known for much longer than a few seconds. I didn't answer her right away. I just sat there in the dark, listening to her words settle into the air like dust finding a place to rest. The silence stretched between us, and I felt it. That strange, unexplainable sensation that something in the room had changed. Not physically, emotionally, quietly, deeply. I took a breath, slow and shaky, trying not to sound afraid. Because that is the thing about moments like these. Fear doesn't announce itself loudly. It arrives softly, like a shadow slipping through an open doorway. "Why did you say that?" I whispered. She didn't answer immediately. I heard the subtle shift of her breathing, the sound of the blanket brushing against her arm, and the soft exhale she always made when she was thinking deeply. "It just feels like it," she finally said. "Like the air is different. Like something is here with us. Not dangerous, just present." Her voice was gentle, steady, thoughtful. Not the voice of someone trying to frighten me. The voice of someone sharing a feeling. And that was what frightened me more. Because deep down, beneath logic and reason, beneath everything I tried to hold on to, I felt it too. A presence. A quietness that didn't belong to the room. A stillness that felt too heavy to be just silence. I swallowed hard and forced myself to breathe again. For most of my life, I thought I understood fear. I thought fear was loud, messy, overwhelming. But that night taught me something different. Fear can be soft. Fear can be quiet. Fear can sit beside you in the dark and say nothing at all. I felt her hand brush against mine, warm and steady. She whispered, "Don't worry. It's not here to hurt us." But somehow that didn't ease me. It made the moment more real. I shifted slightly on the bed and let my eyes adjust to the darkness. Shapes formed, quiet and subtle, the silhouette of the desk, the outline of the door, the faint glow from the streetlight leaking through the curtains. Nothing unusual, nothing out of place. But the feeling was unmistakable. It was like being watched gently, quietly, peacefully, but watched nonetheless. Not by a person, not by something physical, by something that simply existed. I closed my eyes and tried to calm my thoughts. She squeezed my hand again. Her fingers were warm, grounding, real. Her presence beside me felt steady, familiar, comforting. She said again, "We're okay." And the strange thing was, a part of me believed her. Even though I didn't understand what she meant, even though my mind wanted to run in every direction, her voice pulled me back like an anchor being lowered into water. I opened my eyes again and let them float through the blurred shapes of the room. Everything was the same, yet everything felt different. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room, the tap dripping slowly in the bathroom, a car passing outside, its headlights sweeping briefly across the window. Normal sounds, normal life, normal night. But inside me, nothing felt normal. Sometimes the hardest moments are not the ones filled with chaos or noise. Sometimes the hardest moments are the ones filled with silence. because silence leaves space for your deepest thoughts, fears, and memories to surface. I swallowed again, the dryness in my throat making the action feel heavier. "What do you mean we're not alone?" I asked her softly. She shifted on her pillow, and I could tell she was choosing her words carefully. Not to protect me from fear, but to protect the truth from sounding too harsh. "I don't know how to explain it," she said. "It's just a feeling, like something has been with us for a while." My heart beat faster when she said "for a while." I turned my head toward her even though I could barely see the outline of her face in the dark. "How long?" I asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything before she even spoke. "A few days," she whispered. "A few days." My breath caught in my chest, because over the past few days, I had felt small things too. Little moments I brushed aside, little sensations I told myself were just stress or lack of sleep or imagination. Moments where I paused mid-step, moments where the air felt thicker, moments where I felt eyes on me even in empty rooms. A few days. She had noticed, and now she had spoken it out loud. My chest tightened. "What do you think it is?" I asked her, even though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. She let out a slow, thoughtful sigh, the kind she made when she was trying to piece something together inside her mind. "I don't know," she said, eventually. "Not something bad, just something that hasn't moved on yet." Her words made the air grow heavier. Not darker, just heavier. I sat completely still, my fingers wrapped around the edge of the blanket like a lifeline. I tried to picture what she meant, but the more I tried, the more the feeling in the room seemed to settle deeper around us. Something that hasn't moved on yet. Something still here. Something lingering. Something watching. I forced myself to breathe slowly, trying to steady the trembling in my hands. I wanted to ask her more. I wanted to ask if she had seen something, heard something, felt something more specific. But every question formed a knot in my throat, refusing to come out. She seemed to sense my silence. She whispered, "You're scared." I shook my head instinctively, even though we were in the dark and she couldn't see me clearly. "I'm not scared," I whispered, but the truth slipped out in the next breath. "I'm unsettled." She gave a soft, agreement, that kind that wasn't judgmental at all, but accepting, understanding. "Me too," she said. The honesty in her voice made something inside me loosen a little bit. Fear is quieter when it is shared. Loneliness is softer when someone sits beside you in the dark. I shifted again, letting my shoulder rest lightly against hers. Even that small touch brought a sense of grounding I didn't know I needed. Outside, a dog barked somewhere far away, followed by the sound of something metallic clattering. Then quiet again. The room felt smaller now. Not suffocating, just intimate. Like the darkness had drawn its walls closer around us. "Do you want me to turn the light back on?" she asked. I thought about it. About the comfort the light might bring. About the way the brightness pushes back the unknown. But something in me whispered no. Because some truths only appear in the dark. Some feelings only surface when the lights are off. Some moments only make sense when you let yourself sit in stillness. "No," I said softly. "Leave it off." She nodded gently beside me. The silence stretched again, not empty, but full of things we hadn't said yet, full of thoughts moving slowly between us, full of memories, fears, questions. And then she whispered something I didn't expect. "I think whatever's here isn't here to harm us. I think it's here because it can't leave yet, because it's stuck." Her voice was so calm, so sure that I almost forgot to be afraid. "Stuck?" I repeated, my voice barely a breath. "Yes," she said softly.
stuck between holding on and letting go. Her words sank into me deeply, like pebbles falling through water. Stuck, holding on, letting go. I felt those words in places inside me I didn't want to touch, places tied to memories I avoided, places tied to people I had lost, places tied to unresolved moments I carried like invisible weight. Why would something stay? I asked. She took a soft breath before answering. Sometimes things stay because someone is still hurting, she said. Sometimes they stay because someone hasn't healed. Sometimes they stay because there's something unfinished. Her voice didn't shake. Mine did. What if it's because of us? I asked quietly. She placed her hand gently over mine. Then we'll face it together. Her words were steady, warm, certain. In that moment, I realized something quietly overwhelming. This wasn't a story about fear. This wasn't a story about darkness. This wasn't even a story about something unseen. This was a story about what happens when the past refuses to stay buried, when memories linger, when emotions remain unspoken, when truths we avoid come back in softer, quieter ways. The darkness in the room felt different now. Not threatening, not heavy, just present. Like something waiting, like something listening, like something finally acknowledged. I swallowed the tightness in my throat and whispered, "What do we be now?" She didn't hesitate. "We keep the light off," she said gently, "and we try to understand what's really here." Her voice wrapped around me like a soft blanket, comforting, steadying, anchoring. And then something inside me shifted. Something subtle, something I had ignored for too long. A memory, a regret, a loss I never faced. The presence in the room felt closer now, not in a frightening way, but in a familiar one. As if it had been waiting for me to stop running, as if it had been waiting for this silence, for this night, for this moment. I breathed out slowly. For the first time since she turned off the light, I didn't feel alone. Not in the way that frightened me, in the way that softened me, in the way that reminded me that not all presence is meant to be feared. Some is meant to be understood. Some is meant to be healed. And as the darkness settled around us fully, as her hand held mine with gentle certainty, I realized something quietly profound. The real fear was not about what was in the room. The real fear was what was inside me. And for the first time in a long time, I was ready to face it. I grew up believing that silence was peaceful. My mother used to say, "Silence shows you what noise hides." Back then, I didn't understand her. Now I do. Silence has followed me through most of my life, not the calm kind, but the kind that sits in the corners of a room and makes you feel watched by your own memories. The night everything changed, the night she turned off the light and whispered, "We're not alone," I felt the same silence I grew up fearing. But before that moment, before the fear and the realization and the strange truth that followed, life was simple enough, at least on the surface. I lived with my eldest granddaughter, Sarah, and her mother, my daughter-in-law, Amina. My son worked in another city. He visited when he could, always rushing, always tired, always guilty about leaving us. I never blamed him. Life is heavy. Everyone carries something. Their home had become my home, not because I needed a place to stay, but because they said they wanted me there. Or at least that's what I believed for a long time. My days were slow. I cooked simple meals, watered the plants, folded laundry, and tried my best not to get in the way. I kept the volume low when I watched TV. I walked softly. I spoke softly. Old people always try to make themselves smaller. We don't mean to. We just don't want to be a burden. Sarah and I had always been close. She was quiet, gentle, the kind of child who felt everything deeply. She would sit beside me in the evenings playing with my bangles, asking questions no 12-year-old should think about. "Grandma, why do some people leave? Why do people fight? Why do grown-ups cry at night?" Questions she must have heard from closed doors and whispered arguments. But Amina, with her, things were different. At first, she was warm, polite, caring in the way someone is when they're still trying to decide who you are to them. She served me tea without being asked. She insisted I take the bedroom with the window. She smiled often, too often, maybe. But then, life changed for her. She got a new job, one that demanded long hours, one that drained her smile and replaced it with a sigh she carried everywhere. In the kitchen, across the hallway, even into her sleep. And slowly, her warmth cooled. I noticed it in small ways. She stopped asking if I had eaten. She stopped sitting with me after dinner. Her good mornings became shorter, quieter, eventually disappearing completely. I kept telling myself she was tired, that she was overwhelmed, that I should not make assumptions. But assumptions grow when communication shrinks. There were days she wouldn't even look at me, as if I was part of the furniture, something to walk around, not speak to. She never said anything cruel, never raised her voice, never argued. But indifference cuts deeper than anger. I tried to help more. I cleaned the house before she came home. I made her tea the way she liked it, strong with very little sugar. I stayed awake until she returned late at night, just so she wouldn't enter a quiet home. Still nothing changed. Or maybe everything was changing, and I was just refusing to see it. One evening, I overheard her speaking on the phone. Her voice was low, tired, almost defeated. She's always here. I don't get a moment to myself. My name wasn't mentioned, but it didn't have to be. Sometimes the things people don't say are louder than the things they do. I went back to folding laundry with trembling hands. It's strange how fabric can blur when tears fall before they even form. But that night, when Sarah came to me with her homework, her soft voice lifted me back up. "Grandma, can you help me with this paragraph?" Her little hand tugged my sleeve gently. She didn't know the ache in my chest. Children rarely do. They feel the atmosphere, not the story. I smiled and said yes. I always said yes to her. She was my comfort in that house, my quiet ally. But even she felt the shift. One afternoon she asked me, "Do you think Mom is upset with you?" I paused, searching for the right answer. "I think she's tired," I whispered. Sarah nodded, but her eyes told me she didn't believe it. Children understand more than we admit.
Days passed in that strange rhythm, Amina withdrawing, me shrinking, Sarah watching us both. And yet we lived together, shared meals, shared rooms, shared air, but not hearts. I remember the night it all started, the night that led to the moment she turned off the light and said those chilling words. It was raining lightly, the kind of rain that taps on windows as if asking to be let in. The house felt heavier than usual, quiet but not peaceful. Sarah had gone to bed early. Amina sat in the living room with her laptop open, but she wasn't working. She just stared at the screen as though looking through it, lost in thoughts too tangled to speak aloud. I made her ginger tea and placed it beside her gently. She didn't thank me, but she didn't push it away either. Her silence said more than her words ever could. I went to my room, but I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong, not outside, but inside the house, as if the walls were holding their breath. I turned off the bedside lamp, lay back slowly, and tried to listen to my heartbeat, the way I always did when something felt off. But before I could settle, I heard footsteps. Soft, hesitant, moving toward my room. The door opened slightly. Sarah's face peeked through, pale with worry. "Grandma?" she whispered. "Yes, sweetheart? Can I sleep with you tonight?" Of course. She came in quickly, as if something behind her scared her. She crawled into my bed, turned toward me, and whispered, "Mom is acting strange. She keeps turning off the light in the hall and staring at the dark, like she's listening for something." I brushed her hair gently, trying to comfort her, though a flicker of unease crept into me too. "Maybe she's stressed," I said softly. Sarah shook her head. "No, it's different. She keeps whispering things. I don't think she knows I hear." "What kind of things?" I asked. Sarah swallowed hard. She said, "They're here," and she wasn't talking to anyone. A cold ripple moved up my spine, but I didn't want to frighten her, so I held her close, humming softly, the way my mother used to do when storms made our old house shake. Minutes passed, maybe an hour, then footsteps again, slow, dragging slightly, this time stopping in front of my door. The handle turned, the door opened wider. Amina stood there, barefoot, expressionless, her eyes strangely calm, too calm. She didn't step in, she just looked at us. And then, without a word, she reached for the light switch beside my door. Click. Darkness swallowed the room. In a voice so soft it barely reached us, she whispered, "We're not alone." That was the beginning. The moment the ordinary world slipped into something I didn't understand. The moment silence became something else. Not peaceful, not empty, but warning. And before I knew it, our lives, mine, Amina's, Sarah's, were about to unravel into a truth none of us were prepared to face. I wish I could say the days after that night passed quietly, but they didn't. Not because anything dramatic happened, and not because the house suddenly changed, but because I changed. Sometimes the real conflict begins inside you long before anything around you shifts. I didn't tell Sarah what her words did to me that night. I didn't tell her that I barely slept after she whispered, "We're not alone." I didn't tell her that every time the floor creaked or the air moved too softly across my arm, I felt that same heavy pull inside my chest. Instead, I pretended, because pretending felt safer than admitting I was unsettled. And for a while, that worked. For a while, life looked normal. For a while, I convinced myself nothing was wrong. But life has a quiet way of showing you what you don't want to see. And the house had its own way, too. The next morning started gently, as if the world was trying to be kind to me. Sunlight was soft, like it didn't want to wake anything that had been sleeping overnight. Sarah made tea, I made breakfast. The house creaked the way old houses do. Nothing felt unusual. But underneath the ordinary, something lingered, a thought, a feeling, a memory of her whisper, "We're not alone." Every time I turned a corner, part of me expected something, a shape, a shadow, a feeling. The unknown has its own weight, and it sat quietly on my shoulders, patient and persistent. Sarah noticed before I spoke a word. "You're quieter today," she said softly. I smiled. "Just tired." She didn't believe me. I could tell by the way she tilted her head, studying my face like she was reading something between my features. But she didn't push. That was Sarah. She understood silence better than anyone I had ever known. We cleaned the kitchen together. Simple movements, simple tasks, simple silence. But my mind wasn't simple. It kept replaying the moment she turned off the light the night before. The way her voice didn't shake, but her breath did. The way the floor shifted under us, even though neither of us moved. I had been telling myself for hours that it was nothing, but nothing doesn't stay with you like that. Later that afternoon, something small happened, so small that it should have been meaningless, but sometimes the smallest moments carry the deepest weight. I was in the hallway, dusting the small table under the staircase. It was a routine chore, one I'd done thousands of times in my life without thinking, but the air felt different. Not colder, not darker, just heavier. As if the hallway wanted me to walk faster, or leave, or not be there at all. I told myself I was being silly. I even laughed softly, shaking my head at myself. But then something subtle happened. So subtle that if it hadn't been so quiet in the house, I might not have noticed at all. A soft tap. One tap. Then another. Not loud, not sharp, not threatening. Just intentional. Like someone gently touching the wall from the inside. I froze. Dustcloth in my hand. Heart steady, but slower. Breath held without meaning to.
I waited. Nothing. Silence, calmness, but the feeling didn't leave. I stepped back and looked toward the staircase. Nothing unusual. Just the same old wooden steps, polished from years of use. The same chipped railing Sarah always said she'd repaint someday. The same picture frames hanging slightly crooked. Everything ordinary. Everything the same. Everything still. But the moment I stepped away, there it was again. The faintest, softest tap, like a finger touching wood. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I didn't even blink. I only listened. And that's when I realized something. The taps weren't random. They weren't anxious. They weren't rushed. They were slow, measured, almost steady, like someone acknowledging my presence, like someone telling me they were there. My breath trembled softly before I could stop it. I whispered to myself, "Old houses make sounds, that's all." But the truth was quieter, more uncomfortable, more real. It didn't feel like the house. It felt like a tension. That night, I didn't want Sarah to see how uneasy I was feeling, so I kept myself busy. I folded laundry twice just to keep my hands moving. I reorganized the pantry even though it didn't need reorganizing. I wiped the table 3 times even though it was already clean. Busy hands quiet the mind, at least for a while. When night fell, Sarah sat on the couch knitting. Her rhythm was slow, thoughtful. Her eyes lifted to mine more than once, but she didn't say what she was thinking. Finally, she spoke. "Do you want to sleep early tonight?" I hesitated, not because of sleep, but because the thought of turning the lights off again made something inside me tighten. "I'm not tired yet," I said. She nodded, softly, knowingly. We stayed downstairs longer than we needed to. The television played softly, not a show we were watching, just background comfort, something to fill the quiet spaces. But eventually, night always catches up with you, and we had to go upstairs. The hallway felt different that night, not darker, not colder, just quieter, as if sound didn't want to enter it, as if the walls were holding their breath. I didn't want Sarah to notice the way my steps slowed as we approached the bedrooms, but she did. She always did. "You okay?" she whispered. I nodded, but she didn't move, didn't keep walking, didn't pretend she believed me this time. Instead, she studied me quietly. "You felt something today, didn't you?" Her voice wasn't afraid, just gentle. I didn't know how to answer. I didn't want to make her worry. I didn't want to make myself worry. So I said the safest thing. I heard a sound, probably nothing. Sarah didn't flinch, didn't smile, didn't brush it off. She simply said, "I hear things too." Those 4 words pressed into me like a soft weight, not painful, not alarming, just real. I swallowed. What kind of things? She looked down the hallway instead of at me. Steps, sometimes, or the way the air moves, like someone just walked past me. She said it calmly, calmer than I expected. I felt goosebumps rise on my arms, not from fear, from understanding, because I had felt the same thing. Not enough to call it strange, not enough to call it anything at all. Just enough to notice, just enough to remember. Sarah touched my arm. "We're fine," she said softly. "The house is old. Old places hold moments." It was such a gentle explanation, but something about the way she said moments made me wonder what she meant. Before I could ask, she whispered, "Let's sleep. We'll talk tomorrow." But sleep didn't come easily. The room felt heavier than usual, not oppressive, just full, as if the darkness had more weight than normal. I lay awake listening to the soft hum of the heater, the faint rustling of trees outside, Sarah's steady breathing beside me, and then something else, a feeling. Not a sound, a presence. You know the way you can sense someone standing behind you before they speak, before they move, before they touch you? That's what it felt like, as if someone was in the room, quiet, still, patient.
Not threatening, just there, watching, listening, waiting. I turned slightly, slow and careful, not wanting to make noise. Sarah slept peacefully, unaware. I listened. Nothing. But the feeling didn't fade. If anything, it grew more defined, not closer, just clearer, like awareness settling into place. I closed my eyes and breathed deeply, reminding myself to stay calm, reminding myself that fear grows when we give it room to grow. But the feeling stayed. And it stayed the next night, and the night after that, not always strong, not always obvious, not always present, just often enough. Often enough that I started avoiding the hallway at night. Often enough that I double-checked the living room before turning off the lights. Often enough that I found myself listening for something I didn't want to hear. Not footsteps, not whispers, not breathing, just attention. A quiet awareness, a silent company, something not here and not gone, something that didn't want to be seen, only noticed. One evening, about a week after that first night, the rising conflict became impossible to ignore. It was early, barely sunset. The sky was still blue, fading into gold. The house was gentle, soft, calm. Sarah had gone upstairs to shower. I stayed downstairs folding laundry on the living room couch. Everything ordinary, everything quiet. And then the air shifted. Not dramatically, not suddenly, just enough that the hairs on my arm stood up, enough that a soft chill moved up my spine, enough that I paused without thinking. I slowly lifted my head. The room was still, but something felt observed, like the moment before someone speaks your name. I held the shirt halfway folded and waited. Seconds passed, maybe minutes. Time softens when you're uncertain. And then I saw it. Not a shadow, not a figure, not anything visible at all, just movement. Movement where nothing should move. The curtain in the corner swayed gently. No window open, no fan, no breeze. Just a soft, deliberate sway. Slow, measured, intentional. My heart didn't race, it slowed, as if trying to listen more quietly. I stood up slowly. The curtain swayed again just once, then stilled. I approached it carefully, my steps soft, my breath held. I reached out and touched the fabric. Cold. Not freezing, just colder than the rest of the room. Behind me, a floorboard creaked. I turned instantly, but no one was there. Just the empty living room, just folded laundry. Just the quiet space where something unseen had passed through. I whispered to myself, I'm imagining things. But the truth pulsed beneath my words. I wasn't imagining it. I was noticing it. The same way Sarah had. The same way the house wanted us to. Not to scare us, not to hurt us, just to be acknowledged. That night, I couldn't stay silent anymore. I sat at the edge of the bed while Sarah brushed her hair in the bathroom mirror. When she came out, she saw the look on my face immediately. What happened? She asked gently. I didn't know how to start, so I said the simplest thing. I think something was in the living room. Sarah didn't move, didn't blink. She only waited, calm and steady. I continued. It wasn't a sound. It wasn't anything clear. Just a presence, like someone walking by. And the curtain moved even though nothing should have moved it. Sarah sat beside me quietly. Her hand rested lightly on my knee. I know, she said softly. I've felt it too. I turned to her, surprised by her calmness. She wasn't afraid. She wasn't anxious. She wasn't confused. She was accepting. It's not dangerous, she said. It's just there. Her voice was certain. Not confident, certain.
A different kind of strength. Why didn't you tell me before? I whispered. She exhaled softly, as if she had been carrying the answer for a long time. Because I didn't want to make you feel what I felt. I looked at her. Her eyes were gentle but tired. What do you feel? I asked quietly. She hesitated. Not out of fear, but out of careful thought. Not watched, she said, not followed, just accompanied. Accompanied. The word settled into me like a quiet truth. Not alone, not empty, not abandoned. Just accompanied. But accompanied by what? Sarah seemed to read my thoughts. I don't think it's here to harm us, she whispered. I think it just hasn't let go. I didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. Not that night. The unknown didn't feel dangerous, but it didn't feel accidental either. It felt intentional in a quiet, patient way. A presence that wasn't loud, wasn't bold, wasn't threatening, just present. And as the days went on, that presence grew clearer, not stronger, not closer, just clearer. A shift in the hallway air, a breath where breath shouldn't be, a soft pressure on the mattress before sleep, a faint scent of something familiar but unplaceable, a curtain that swayed when the room was still, nothing dramatic, nothing explainable, nothing certain, just the rising conflict of an unknown that refused to stay hidden, the kind of tension that doesn't shout, it whispers, it waits, it watches, it exists. And the more I tried to pretend nothing was wrong, the more the house reminded me that something was. I did not expect that night to become the moment everything would tilt, the moment the quiet confusion I had been feeling for weeks would finally take shape. I thought it would be an ordinary evening, like every other evening we had spent together. She was sitting on the couch, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her eyes distant in a way I had learned to recognize. It was the look she had when she was thinking too much, the look she wore when something inside her felt heavier than what she allowed herself to say. I remember sitting down beside her, close enough for our arms to touch, but not close enough to make her feel crowded. I wanted her to lean on me when she felt ready. She didn't, not right away. The room was warm, softly lit by a single lamp in the corner. It was the kind of light that makes shadows move slowly, the kind that makes a home feel safe. But that night, even the soft glow felt uncertain. I could feel something shifting in the air, something I could not name yet. She turned her face slightly toward me but didn't speak. I waited quietly. Silence between two people who understand each other can still be gentle, but that night the silence felt like a thin thread stretched tight between us. After a long moment, she finally exhaled. "Can we turn the light off?" she asked. Her voice was low, steady, but there was a tremor beneath the calm. I nodded. When I stood up and crossed the room, she watched me, not with fear, not with worry, but with something deeper, something that made my chest tighten. I turned off the lamp. The room sank into darkness. Not frightening darkness, just a kind that felt serious, like the truth needed dimness to come forward. When I returned to the couch, she whispered the words that would echo inside me for the rest of the night. "We're not alone." I didn't speak. I didn't ask. I just let her continue. because the tone in her voice was not about fear of something supernatural. It was something else, something closer, something human, something emotional. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, but not because she was cold. It felt like she was bracing herself against something she didn't want to face. I waited, breathing slowly, giving her space to unfold whatever was inside her. Her hands were trembling slightly, though she tried to hide it by keeping them under the blanket. I reached out gently, letting my fingers touch her wrist. She didn't pull away. Her voice dropped even lower. She said, "I've been carrying something. And I think it's time I stop carrying it alone." My chest tightened. I could feel the heaviness in her words. I could hear the exhaustion of someone who had been holding too much without a place to put it. I stayed quiet, letting her gather her courage. The darkness made it a little easier for her, I think. Some truths don't want to be spoken under bright light. "She didn't tell me," she whispered. "I didn't want to lose what we have." My stomach sank. Those were the kind of words that can lead in many directions, none of them simple. Her voice wavered. I could hear her breathing becoming uneven, like she was fighting the instinct to retreat again. I moved closer, resting my hand fully over hers. She gripped my fingers tightly as if she needed something solid to hold on to. "You're not losing anything," I said softly. "You're safe with me." The room responded with its own silence, a deep, thick silence that felt like it wrapped around us, holding everything in place. She took another breath, this one shaky. "I haven't been honest," she finally said. "Not angry, not fearful, just tired." It was a confession without details yet, but the weight of it pressed into the space between us. My heart beat slower, more carefully. I didn't interrupt her. I didn't try to save her from the truth she was trying to reveal. Some truths need to come out in their own time. "There's someone else involved," she continued. Those words felt like cold air. Not because she had betrayed me, my mind didn't rush to that conclusion. It was the way she said it. The sadness in her voice, the heaviness. It felt like someone else had been affecting her life, her decisions, her fears. Someone she didn't want affecting her at all. She swallowed hard before adding, "He's been following me." My breath caught. I turned slightly toward her, trying to see her face in the darkness, but she looked down. Her shoulders curled inward. She wasn't hiding from me. She was hiding from the memory. At first, she said, "I thought I imagined it. A figure near the bus stop, someone standing across the street, a shadow in the hallway of my building. I tried to ignore it. I tried to pretend it wasn't real." I felt my entire body go still. My heartbeat slowed, not out of fear, but out of focus, deep, sharp focus. "And when I told you we weren't alone," she whispered, "I didn't mean someone was in this house. I meant he finds ways to be near, too near." I reached up and cupped her cheek gently. Her skin was warm, trembling under my hand. She leaned into the touch for just a second, then straightened up again, as if she didn't want to rely on comfort too much. "She didn't tell me," she said, "because I didn't want you to worry. And because I didn't know if it was real. But last night..." She stopped. Her breathing hitched. "Last night, I heard him outside my door." The air in the room shifted sharply. I felt something inside me tighten like a wire pulled too far. My instincts sharpened, my thoughts aligned quickly. But I didn't let fear take over my voice. "What did she do?" I asked softly. "He didn't knock," she said. "He didn't speak. He just stood there." I could hear his breathing, slow, intentional, like he wanted me to know he was there. I closed my eyes for a moment. I could imagine the scene too vividly. The hallway, the quiet, the presence of someone who wanted to unsettle more than harm. A psychological intrusion, a deliberate strategy. And tonight, she added, when the light was on, I kept feeling like he was watching. She swallowed again, not from outside, from inside myself, like the fear had followed me all the way here. She finally looked at me, her eyes shining faintly even in the dimness. I didn't want to be alone with it anymore. I moved closer, wrapping my arm around her, pulling her gently against my chest. She didn't resist. She rested her head on my shoulder, her breath warm against my skin. Her body softened slightly, as if finally releasing tension she had been holding for so long. "I'm here," I whispered. "You're not alone anymore." The darkness around us felt different now, not threatening, but protective, like it was giving us space to breathe. She stayed in my arms for a long minute, her breath evening out slowly. I could feel her heart beating, fast but not panicked. more like it was adjusting to safety. Then, in a voice barely above a breath, she said the words that would shift the entire direction of the night. "He used to know me." My hand froze against her shoulder. "He wasn't a stranger," she said. "Not at the beginning." Her voice cracked for the first time, and that was the moment, the sharp, clear moment that I knew the night would no longer be quiet. This was no longer about shadows near a bus stop or footsteps in a hallway. This was about a past that had remained unspoken, a connection that once existed and had slowly turned into danger. A truth she had carried alone for so long. That was the exact second the story changed. That was the turning point. The night felt heavier at first, even after the truth had been spoken. But that heaviness wasn't anger or panic. It was relief mixed with exhaustion, relief that the secret no longer had to live alone inside her, and exhaustion from carrying it for so long. I stayed close, holding her gently, feeling her shoulders relax little by little. The darkness that once seemed oppressive now felt protective, like it was giving us space to adjust to what had been revealed. The room didn't need bright light anymore. The shadows held us quietly as we breathed together, letting the silence become comfortable rather than threatening. I guided her to sit back on the couch, letting her lean against me for support. "We'll face this together," I said softly, and I meant every word. There was no rush, no plan for what came next, just a promise, solid and gentle. Her eyes met mine for a brief moment, glimmering with gratitude and something else. Trust. It was fragile, like glass balanced on a windowsill, but it was real. That trust had to be nurtured slowly. The night itself seemed to approve, the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint creak of the old floorboards turning into a rhythm that mirrored our slow, careful breathing. We sat like that for some time, neither speaking nor moving much. It was as if our hearts were recalibrating, finding a balance after the chaos of revelation. Every tick of the clock on the wall, every soft creak of the building, every distant sound from the street outside, everything became part of a quiet orchestra, grounding us in the present. I could feel her tension ebbing away, replaced with a cautious sense of safety. I let her take the lead, letting her speak when she was ready, knowing that each word carried the weight of fear, history, and healing all at once. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't think I could tell anyone." Her voice trembled slightly,
But it wasn't broken. It was honest. I didn't think anyone could understand. I nodded. I understood, not because I had experienced exactly what she had, but because I had learned that some burdens are carried silently until someone proves worthy of holding them. I reached for her hand, letting our fingers intertwine. "I understand," I said, and the simplicity of the statement held as much gravity as any elaborate speech. Sometimes words don't need decoration to carry meaning. Sometimes they simply need truth. She exhaled slowly, the kind of deep exhale that releases months or even years of held tension. "It's been living inside me for so long," she said. "I was scared it would define me forever." I squeezed her hand, feeling the fragility and strength intertwined in her grip. "It doesn't have to define you," I said. "You're more than that, and you're not alone anymore. Not tonight. Not ever again, if you let me help." The weight in the room shifted subtly after that. It wasn't dramatic, not at all. It was a gentle settling, like water returning to a calm state after a storm has passed. We began to talk, softly at first, words spilling slowly, each sentence measured. She recounted fragments of the past, the moments that had scared her, the encounters that had left her feeling powerless, the fear she hadn't wanted to burden anyone with. I listened. Every word mattered. Every pause, every hesitation carried meaning. I didn't rush her, didn't interrupt or question. I only offered presence, the kind that can't be taught, but only felt. Hours seemed to pass, though the night didn't change its darkness much. And yet, something subtle began to happen. The tightness in her chest loosened. Her shoulders uncurled. Her voice gained a steady rhythm. And with each small revelation, the silence that had once been heavy became lighter. She began to laugh softly at minor memories, not forced, not masking sadness, but genuine. Laughter became a companion again,
a sign that healing had begun in tiny increments. We spoke of plans, not immediate plans, not confrontations, not even solutions, but plans that centered on her well-being. Simple things: checking locks on doors, telling trusted friends, arranging small routines that would give her a sense of control and safety. Each plan was small, deliberate, a brick laid carefully to rebuild stability. And as she spoke, I noticed her eyes no longer darting anxiously toward shadows. The room, once oppressive with unspoken dread, now felt like a harbor. Safe, soft, a place where trust could grow. I told her about my own experiences, times I had carried burdens alone, the quiet fears that had shaped my decisions, the moments I had pretended not to notice pain because I feared vulnerability. She listened. We shared that rare, sacred space of mutual understanding, where both of our pasts, though different, intersected in empathy. We weren't trying to solve everything, weren't trying to rewrite history. We were simply witnessing each other's reality and offering presence as proof that neither of us had to face life entirely alone. Sleep eventually claimed her first, softly, gently. I watched her for a long while, marveling at the quiet strength it took to survive fear for so long and the courage it took to finally release it. Even in slumber, her body spoke a language of relief. I rested nearby, not moving, not speaking. I allowed myself to reflect on the profound significance of simply being there. Sometimes, the most heroic acts aren't in grand gestures or dramatic rescues. They're in showing up, in holding space, in letting someone know they're safe. And that night, that truth was more powerful than anything else. Morning light eventually seeped through the curtains, soft and hesitant, painting the room with gentle hues of gold and gray. She stirred awake slowly, blinking against the light. But I could see the calm in her eyes. Not complete resolution, not perfect peace, but something stronger. Readiness. Readiness to face the day. Readiness to rebuild routines. Readiness to trust again, cautiously but truly. The past would still be a part of her, but it no longer held the same suffocating weight. And in that readiness, I found a quiet hope, the kind that is patient, persistent, and enduring.
We spoke again in the soft morning glow, planning the steps she felt comfortable taking. No pressure, no urgency, just conversation and understanding. Each decision was hers. I was only the witness, the support, the calm presence that affirmed she did not have to be alone anymore. I watched her smile as she realized she could breathe without anxiety pulling at her chest. It was subtle, almost imperceptible at first, but it was there, a tiny victory after a long struggle. And for a moment, the room didn't feel like a place of shadows. It felt like a sanctuary, like we had carved safety from fear, simply through presence and honesty. As we finished our quiet discussion, she turned toward me and said, "Thank you for listening, for staying, for not leaving." Her voice held a reverence that caught me off guard, even though I had expected nothing less. I nodded. "I'm here," I said again, softly, gently, "and I'll stay, as long as you need." There was no need to elaborate, no need to explain further. Sometimes words are enough, not because they are perfect, but because they are true. The day continued outside the windows, indifferent to the intimate transformation that had occurred in that quiet living room. Cars passed, birds chirped, the world kept moving. And yet, inside, everything had slowed to a deliberate, meaningful pace. We had confronted fear, named it, felt it, and released it into the shared air of understanding. No miracles, no dramatic confrontations, no sudden resolutions, just patience, empathy, honesty, and the gentle affirmation of human presence. I stayed with her until she felt steady enough to move through the day. She took small steps, each one measured and confident, each one a reaffirmation of courage. And as I watched her go about those movements, I understood the quiet moral of the night.
Sometimes the bravest act isn't running, isn't hiding, isn't fighting alone. It's opening yourself to someone else, letting them witness your truth, and trusting that presence can carry you further than fear ever could. When the door closed behind her for a short errand, I stayed in the quiet room for a moment longer. I breathed in deeply, letting the night's lessons settle into me as well. I realized that the resolution of another person's burden often brings clarity to your own. In standing by her, I had learned again the power of patience, empathy, and steadfast calm. The night's darkness, the fears, the uncertainty, all of it had transformed into understanding, into calm, into hope. By the time the sun climbed higher, casting light fully into the room, I felt it too. The weight lifted, the air cleared, the quiet strength of shared survival and mutual support. The storm had passed. Not everything was perfect, not every fear erased, but the beginning of healing had taken root. And that, I realized, was more than enough. The morning light was soft, almost hesitant, as if it too had been waiting for us to emerge from the long night. I sat by the window, the warmth of the sun spilling gently across the floor, and I watched the city begin to wake. Birds chirped, distant engines roared, and people hurried along sidewalks that seemed endless. And yet the world outside no longer felt overwhelming. It felt quiet, patient, almost gentle. After a night filled with revelations, confessions, and the slow unraveling of fears, I understood how stillness could teach more than movement ever could. The train of the night had carried us not just through darkness, but through the intricacies of the human heart. And now, as the day unfolded, I could see clearly the weight we had left behind. I rose from my chair and walked slowly across the room, careful not to disturb the fragile sense of calm that had settled over everything. Each step felt deliberate, meaningful, as though even walking had become a meditation. The memories of the night, of confessions, quiet tears, and whispered reassurances, mingled with the soft light, turning the space into something sacred. I opened a window and let the cool morning air drift in, carrying with it the faint scent of grass and rain from earlier. It was refreshing, grounding, a reminder that life moves forward whether we are ready or not. And that realization was comforting. She entered the room quietly, her movements measured but confident, and I noticed immediately the subtle difference in her posture. There was a gentleness in her steps, a steadiness in her gaze, as if the shadows of the night no longer held dominion over her. Her eyes met mine, and for a moment, words were unnecessary. There was understanding there, a shared acknowledgement that we had both survived the emotional storm, and in that silent exchange, we felt connected. I offered her a small smile, tentative, careful, and she returned it, a quiet warmth that spoke volumes. We didn't need dramatics, we didn't need loud affirmations. The room, the morning, and the shared calm between us said more than any words could. We made tea together, moving slowly, letting the act of preparing a warm drink become a ritual of normalcy. The kettle hissed, the water poured, and steam curled gently into the sunlight. She hummed softly, almost unconsciously, and I realized that even small sounds can mark a turning point in healing. The night had taught us to appreciate presence, to recognize comfort in simplicity, and now the morning allowed us to practice it. I watched her hands as she stirred the tea, careful and deliberate, and I marveled at how ordinary actions could carry extraordinary meaning when observed with awareness. We had survived fear, faced truths, and now we were learning to live in the quiet aftermath. We talked, softly, about nothing and everything, about the weather, the way the city seemed to stretch beneath the morning sun, and about memories too gentle to recall in the night. Her laughter returned in small bursts, hesitant at first, then steadier, warmer. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple, honest, and healing. I found myself laughing too, quietly, at memories I hadn't thought about in years. The kind of laughter that doesn't erase pain, but coexists with it, creating a delicate balance between sorrow and relief. It reminded me that even after darkness, life continues to offer moments of light if we are willing to notice them. We ate breakfast together, quietly, without distraction. Every sip, every bite, every glance held weight, not heavy, but meaningful. I noticed how her eyes lingered on small details, the steam rising from the cup, the sunlight hitting the edge of the plate, the subtle reflection of trees in the window. She was present, truly present, and I realized that presence was the essence of healing. The night had taught us to be vigilant, to acknowledge fear and vulnerability. The morning taught us to exist gently, to accept life's continuity without being overwhelmed by it. There was balance now, and it was fragile but real. I suggested a walk just for a short distance, and she agreed, her smile calm and steady. We moved through the streets, our pace unhurried, savoring the quiet rhythm of life around us. People passed, unaware of the journey we had endured, but that was all right. We didn't need recognition or validation. Our progress, however subtle, was enough. Each step forward felt symbolic, a release from the emotional grip of the previous night. The city's noises were no longer threatening, but became part of a gentle chorus, reminding us that life continues, and so must we. The world was unchanged, yet it felt transformed because we were. We talked about the past, softly, carefully, not in search of blame or anger, but in search of understanding. The confessions, the fears, the hidden burdens, they all found their place in conversation. We named the truths that had haunted us, acknowledged the pain that had lingered, and admitted the regrets we had carried. And in that naming, in that shared recognition, something shifted. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it became undeniable. We were lighter. The weight of unspoken fears had been lifted through presence, empathy, and simple acknowledgement of what exists. The night allowed for confession. The morning allowed for reconciliation, not necessarily with others, but with ourselves. I noticed the way her gaze softened as she spoke, the way her hands relaxed, the way her laughter became freer. And I realized something fundamental. Healing isn't instantaneous, and closure doesn't always come from dramatic gestures. It comes from patience, understanding, and the quiet commitment to bear witness to someone else's reality. It comes from showing up even when it's uncomfortable, even when it's slow, even when progress feels almost invisible. That truth, simple yet profound, was the legacy of the night we had endured. And in the morning light, it became tangible, almost palpable. We returned to the room, our steps calm and unhurried, and I noticed how ordinary objects, books on the shelf, photographs on the wall, the soft rug underfoot, suddenly felt alive. They carried memory, stability, and continuity. They reminded us that life, even in its smallest details, is worthy of attention. We didn't need grand gestures to anchor ourselves. Presence, observation, and the gentle acknowledgement of what exists in front of us was sufficient. And in that sufficiency, we found peace.
I made a simple observation. The night gave us time, didn't it? She nodded. It did, she replied softly. Time to breathe, to think, to feel, to exist without rushing. And in that simple acknowledgement, I felt the culmination of the journey. We had traveled through fear, through uncertainty, through revelation and confession, and emerged on the other side with a sense of clarity. The journey wasn't over, of course. Life never stops. But the path ahead felt navigable, steady, and full of possibility. Not all questions had answers, not all wounds had healed, but the foundation had been laid, and that was enough. I noticed her expression as she looked out the window at the city awakening beneath the sun. There was a soft serenity there, and understanding that even though challenges remained, there was resilience to face them, and I realized that our connection, born from presence, honesty, and gentle support, had become a lifeline, not dependent on grand gestures, but on the quiet constancy of being. That, I understood, was one of life's greatest truths. Sometimes the deepest transformation comes not from dramatic events, but from calm, steadfast care. We spent the remainder of the morning in quiet companionship, sharing small tasks, observing life around us, and appreciating the mundane in a way that felt extraordinary.
Each act, pouring water, arranging cushions, reading the news silently, was imbued with meaning because of the emotional journey that had preceded it. The ordinary had become sacred, not because it was unusual, but because we had witnessed the extraordinary weight of the night and survived it together. And survival, we realized, is only the first step toward life's gentlest joys. Before the day fully claimed the city, we paused by the window again. The sunlight had strengthened, illuminating corners that had been dark. Shadows had shifted, softened, retreated, and in that light I felt a sense of completeness. Not absolute, but enduring. We had traveled through fear, faced truths, survived revelation, and emerged capable of hope. The day held potential, but the night had given us the tools to approach it with calm confidence. That realization, subtle yet profound, was a gift I knew would linger for years. As she prepared to step outside for a brief walk, I offered her a simple piece of advice, quiet and heartfelt. Trust yourself. Take the moment slowly. You've earned the calm. She smiled, a soft, radiant acknowledgement that carried gratitude, understanding, and readiness all at once. I will, she replied. And in her response, I recognized the enduring lesson of our journey. Patience, empathy, presence, and gentle guidance can heal wounds that seem insurmountable. They can transform fear into strength, silence into understanding, and uncertainty into quiet hope. I lingered by the window as she stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on my skin. The world moved forward, and so would we, carrying the lessons of the night into the clarity of day. There was no need for dramatic proclamations or sudden resolutions. The transformation had occurred quietly, deeply, authentically. Life, I realized, always offers another sunrise, another opportunity, another chance to move forward if we choose to face it with patience, honesty, and presence. The morning continued to unfold, each moment a gentle affirmation that, even after long nights, emotional storms, and profound revelations, life provides space to heal, to reflect, to breathe. The day was not perfect, the future not entirely known, but the clarity gained from facing truth, witnessing pain, and nurturing understanding allowed us to meet what comes next with quiet strength. And that strength, calm and enduring, would carry us through not just one day, but many, teaching us that hope is not loud. It is subtle, patient, and steadfast. We had arrived, not at a dramatic ending, not at a moment of perfection, but at the gentle, persistent dawn of understanding, acceptance, and quiet hope. And in that dawn, I felt the culmination of everything we had endured, the night's lessons translating into the light of day. The journey had been long, challenging, and profound, but the ending, soft as it was, felt more powerful than any storm could. It was not the conclusion of life, nor the resolution of every pain, but it was the beginning of something enduring, clarity, acceptance, and a readiness to meet the world with open hearts.